In the winter of 1836, James Greenacre was residing at 2 Carpenter's Place in Camberwell, London. He styled himself as a man of means, boasting of land holdings in America. According to testimony from Evan Davis, a cabinet maker who later appeared at Greenacre's trial, he claimed to own a sprawling farm, some 1,000 acres, near Hudson Bay. Greenacre also spoke openly of plans to return to the States, hinting at unfinished business across the Atlantic. Not far from the Middlesex Hospital at 45 Union Street lived Hannah Brown, a middle-aged woman sharing her home with her niece. Her landlord, John Corney, a shoemaker by trade, occupied the adjoining property. His wife, Elizabeth Corney, maintained a warm and familiar friendship with Hannah, often seen chatting over the fence or exchanging small kindnesses between households. Hannah Brown made her living quietly and respectably, taking in laundry from private clients. Those who knew her described her as sober, industrious, and dependable. She had long been estranged from her younger brother, and her sister, believed to be a hat maker, was living in Norwich. By late 1836, Hannah's life seemed poised for change. She was engaged to James Greenacre, their wedding set for Christmas Day at St. Giles in the Fields. In anticipation for her marriage, Hannah sold off her personal belongings by December 24th, telling her neighbor, Elizabeth Corney, that she would have no need for them. Soon, she explained, she would be sailing to America with her new husband. On the afternoon of Christmas Eve, Hannah bid Elizabeth farewell. She mentioned there was still a few items in her room that did not belong to her and promised to return the key in a few days. Moments later, Elizabeth saw her step into a hansom cab alongside a man who helped load several boxes. Though she had only met him once before, Elizabeth would later testify that the man was unmistakably James Greenacre. 4 days later, on Wednesday, December 28th, James White was passing through Pineapple Place, near the Edgware Road, when he noticed a stone slab propped against a wall. Behind it lay what he first thought was a bag. On closer inspection, it proved to be a sack tied with string. White sent his assistant, Robert Bond, to fetch the constable. Police Constable Samuel Pegler soon arrived, and when the sack was opened, it revealed a grim discovery: the headless and legless torso of a woman. Nearby lay several rags, which Pegler gathered along with the remains, transporting them away in a wheelbarrow for further examination. At trial, road mender Ezekiel Dickens testified that the slab had been lifted from the road for repairs before Christmas and placed against the wall. On December 24th, he had stored a piece of timber behind it. There had been no sack there at the time. The sack itself was traced to Evan Davis, a cabinet maker and upholsterer from Bartholomew Close. He recognized it instantly, noting distinctive holes made by his children during play. Davis had known Hannah Brown for 5 years and, upon hearing of her engagement, had even offered to host the wedding supper. He often sold wood shavings in such sacks, and this particular one had been given to Hannah. She usually returned them, but not this time. Then, on the morning of Friday, January 6, 1837, Matthias Ralph, lockkeeper at Johnson's Lock on the Regent's Canal, found the gates would not close. A bargeman suggested something was caught in the mechanism. Using a hitcher, a long pole with a hook, Ralph pulled the obstruction from the water. At first, he thought it was a dead dog. Instead, it was a human head, with long dark hair trailing in the current. Ralph wrapped it in cloth and carried it to the bone house. He testified that one eye was badly damaged, and one ear bore old injuries from childhood, healed but leaving it misshapen. The right side of the lower jaw was also badly damaged, the bone protruding through the skin. A post-mortem revealed a severe blow to the back of the head. While experts disagreed on which injuries occurred before or after death, all 3 surgeons who testified agreed on one point. The wound near the left eye had been inflicted while the victim was still alive. On Thursday, February 2nd, laborer James Page was tending to an osier bed along Cold Harbor Lane, between Camberwell and Brixton, when something caught his eye among the bushes. A sack, frayed and weathered, with a hole torn on its side. Through it, he glimpsed what looked disturbingly like parts of a human knee. A constable was summoned, and another workman opened the sack. Inside lay a pair of human legs. Police Constable William Woodward soon arrived, and Page helped carry the grim findings to the station house. Investigators had already linked a head and torso to the same victim. It took little time to confirm that these legs completed the remains. When Hannah Brown had left her lodgings, she told her neighbors that she would return in a couple of days to collect the rest of her belongings. On December 28th, a boy returned her key, but the items were never claimed. John Corney, her landlord and a shoemaker, knew that cabinet maker Evan Davis was a friend of Hannah's. When Corney asked if Davis knew her whereabouts, Davis recalled the recent discovery of a woman's head in the Regent's Canal. Realizing Hannah had not been seen for some time, he went to the poorhouse and identified the head as hers. Hannah had known Mrs. Blanchard since childhood. Her brother, William Gay, worked for Mrs. Blanchard, and both had been invited to Hannah's Christmas Day wedding, though James Greenacre had no idea William was her brother. On the evening of December 24th, Greenacre called on Miss Blanchard to announce the wedding was off. He claimed he had discovered Hannah did not own the property she'd spoken of, had incurred debts in his name, and that they had agreed to part ways. When Mrs. Blanchard mentioned William Gay's relation to Hannah, Greenacre turned pale and left abruptly. Accounts differ on what happened next. Some sources say Hannah's friends obtained a warrant for Greenacre's arrest. Others claimed a reward was offered for information on his whereabouts. Both may well be true. What is certain is that on Sunday, March 25th, 1837, Inspector George Feltham went to Greenacre's new address in St. Albans Place and arrested him on suspicion of murder. Inside, he found a woman named Sarah Gale. She was in possession of several items that were later proven to belong to Hannah Brown: a gold watch, rings, and a pair of cornelian earrings. She also held pawn receipts for more of Hannah's property. A child's dress in the house had been patched with fabric identical to the rags found near the sack containing Hannah's torso. Neighbors from Carpenter's Place told police that Gale had presenting herself as Mrs. Greenacre since the previous October. Though they knew the pair were not legally married, they treated them as husband and wife and were unaware of any other woman in Greenacre's life. A saw and a knife recovered from the residence were later found to match the wounds on Hannah's remains. The trial opened at the Central Criminal Court on Monday, April 3, 1837, before Chief Judge Sir Nicholas Conyngham Tyndall. Prosecutors John Adolphus and Sir William Henry Bodkin argued that Greenacre's proposal of marriage had been nothing but a ruse. Instead, they claimed he had plotted her murder to seize her possessions and flee to America with his accomplice, Sarah Gale. The fatal blow to the back of Hannah Brown's head left no outward trace. It was only during the post-mortem that the surgeons uncovered the hemorrhage beneath the scalp. Proof, they said, that the injury had been inflicted while she was still alive. This trauma, however, could not account for the damage to her right eye. The prosecution argued that she had first been struck in the face from the front, then fallen backwards against a hard surface. Believing her dead, James Greenacre had begun the grim work of dismembering her body to conceal the crime. They further alleged that his clumsy disposal of the remains was shaped by his expectation of leaving England immediately. 2 of the 3 body parts had been abandoned in places where workmen were active, locations where discovery was inevitable. To the prosecution, this was not carelessness, but evidence of premeditation. Greenacre had planned his escape long before the killing. 3 medical men took the stand. Mr. Gilbert Finley Gurwood testified that the wounds around the right eye were inflicted before death, while the other head injuries occurred afterwards. In his view, the first blow was likely delivered with a fist rather than a weapon, its force sufficient to render even a healthy woman like Hannah Brown temporarily unconscious. Dr. James Hunter Lane spoke to Hannah's general health, the contents of her stomach, and the bruising on her face. His findings echoed the testimony of her friends. She was temperate, diligent, and in good health. He argued that the injury to her right eye, and almost certainly the incision to her neck, were inflicted before death, though she was probably insensible by then. Dr. John Birthwhistle confirmed that the wound above the right eye was pre-mortem. He suggested that the broken jaw and the damage to the left side of the face was caused while holding the head steady during decapitation. He identified the saw in evidence as the one used to remove the head and said the knife could have caused the other injuries, though he conceded that many knives may have done so. He also confirmed that the head, torso, and legs all belonged to the same body. In his defense, Greenacre admitted killing Hannah Brown, but claimed it was accidental, born of a quarrel over money on the eve of their wedding. Only then, he said, did he learn she was not as wealthy as she had claimed. In the heat of the argument, he struck her with a piece of wood he happened to be holding. Panicking and fearing he could not prove his innocence, he decided to hide the body. His plan to take Sarah Gale to America, he insisted, arose only after it was clear Hannah would not be joining him. He maintained that Gale knew nothing of Hannah Brown, played no role in the killing, and was unaware that the items in her possession were stolen. The jury deliberated for just 15 minutes. Their verdict: James Greenacre was guilty of willful murder, and Sarah Gale was guilty of harboring him and attempting to profit from the crime. Greenacre was sentenced to hang, and Gale was transported for life.